Scripture where we understand that it's not that baptism in and of itself is what saves a person, but it is a part of a response of the act of faith. And when a person believes in their heart that they've come to faith in Yeshua, they've confessed Him, the first step of obedience is going right back to what Yeshua said, and that is to be immersed. And so I would like to say that what is really the expectation, the sign of membership in a congregation? Really needs to be the mikvah. It needs to be the baptism. You said, great, you're talking about baptism in the month of January. That's wonderful. We're going to go and get immersed, and we're going to jump down in the waters that are, by the way, they're really not that cold. I mean, this is Texas. I mean, come on, right? We really don't have wintertime here. Could you imagine living in Minnesota or New York or Alaska or somewhere like that? And you know, I've heard of missionaries that were in Russia that would actually dig pits in the ice, and they would fill it with water. And these people in Russia, they were so excited about their faith in taking the step of obedience that they would undergo the waters even in this cold experience. Couple of things. If you're going to come into the temple, if you're going to come into the Mishkan, if you're going to come into the presence of God, you have to be purified. That really comes through faith in Yeshua. But the mikvah is a symbol of that. The mikvah is a picture of that. Just as the earth had to be purified after its violence that it went into, and God immersed the earth in the flood and renewed it, in the same way the human heart has to be renewed. And that is signified by the mikvah. And by the way, Yeshua identified himself with the Israelites, with the people of God, of his nation, and signifying with the Israel's plight, and Yeshua becomes the quintessential Israelite. In the same way, what are we doing when we undergo the mikvah? We are identifying with the people of God. We are saying that we are identifying with the people of God, but we are identifying with Yeshua, who underwent the mikvah. Just as Yeshua died, the mikvah is a picture of death. Just as Yeshua died and went down underneath the ground, or went into the grave, and he came out on the third day, in the same way, when we do the mikvah, we are signifying that we are identified with Yeshua, that I have been crucified with Messiah. It is no longer I who lives, but Messiah lives in me. And the life that I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who has loved me. Romans chapter 6. I didn't give this to Sam, and we don't have this up here, but I'm just going to read it. And the real question is, what does the mikvah signify? It signifies that we have identified ourselves with Yeshua's death, burial, and resurrection. And interestingly, the mikvah, which is a term for water gathering, it's related to the Hebrew term for tikva, hope, kavah. We are also saying that, look, just as we will die, if we die before Yeshua returns, here's what's going to happen. Yeshua is going to raise us up from the ground, and we are going to have a new body, and we are going to be glorified with Him. In Romans chapter 6, what shall we say then? Are we to continue to sin that the grace may increase? Meganoita, may it never be. This is the closest thing that Paul ever says to HE double hockey sticks, no. How shall we who died to sin still live in it? Or do you not know that all of us who have been immersed, baptized into Messiah Yeshua, have been baptized into His death? Therefore we have been buried with Him through baptism into death, so that Messiah was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, so that we might too have newness of life. For we have become united with Him in His likeness of His death. Certainly we shall also be in the likeness of His resurrection. There it is. There's the hope. We're identifying with Yeshua. When we've been through the baptismal waters of immersion and we've experienced that, we have identified with Yeshua what He did and what He is going to do. Have you experienced that? Is my question. Knowing this, that our old self was crucified with Him in order that our body of sin might be done away with, so that we would no longer be slaves to sin. For he who has died is free from sin. Paul's saying, look, already, not yet. We're supposed to live already, not yet. Living as though you've already died, and you've already been resurrected, and you're in God's presence, in which it's not possible to sin. It's an imperative, it's a call to holiness. And it begins with the mikvah. And it's interesting that in for those that many Muslims that have come to faith in Yeshua, that have come to faith and belief in Jesus, oftentimes the real telltale point for them is the baptism, because oftentimes, in fact, if a person is Muslim, in many traditional churches where the baptism is oftentimes streamed online, they have to say, look, please don't. I don't want this streamed online, because they could potentially, if they have family that's back in the Middle East, there's now a death warrant that's put out for them. The important point is that yes, we come to faith in Yeshua, and yes, it begins with a confession of faith, and we ask God for forgiveness, teshuva. That can begin in the heart. You don't have to be baptized in order to be saved, but as a signified mark of belonging to the congregation and identifying with the Lord in a very real and a dynamic way, your best statement of commitment is when you go through those mikvah waters. And it's a commitment. And I know that for many people, they will say that maybe they struggled with many things, and I don't think there's anything mystical about baptism in that sense. But they can say that their commitment was solidified when they went through with that mikvah. And the first step of obedience and becoming a part of the congregation and taking membership in the community of faith is the mikvah, the hope of Israel, through Yeshua Messiah, undergoing the baptismal waters. Yeshua was immersed for the purpose of identifying with the nation of Israel, with setting us an example, and it signifies the symbolism of purification that we have gone through in our heart in turning from sin and turning to faith in Yeshua. And it is our signified death and the statement of our hope in the resurrection.